Can you hear me?
Yes, Doc.
Okay, no questions so far? Wala kayong tanong with regard to first topics? Okay, kung wala, edi magtuloy na tayo. Okay, this is a table showing the blood flow in different organs under basal condition. So you can see here the different tissues, the different organs, the percent of cardiac output going to that organ. And yung pinakahuling part ng table is the amount of blood flow in ml per minute per gram of the tissue. Okay, under normal basal condition, it is quite clear here that blood flow in the different organs differ. Note the very high blood flow in the kidneys, in the adrenal, as well as in the thyroid gland. And look at the low blood flow in an inactive muscle. Okay, pag inactive yung muscle, napakaliit ng blood flow. This is what I am telling you kanina. The blood flow to a certain tissue is dictated by the need of that tissue. And probably one might ask the simple question, why not simply allow a very large blood flow all the time through every tissue of the body? Always enough, always big to supply the tissue's needs, whether the activity of the tissue is little or great. The answer is equally simple. To do this would require many times more blood flow than the heart can pump. Kawawa naman yung heart, pagod na pagod. Why should it pump blood into an area where blood is not needed? Okay, so studies have shown that the blood flow to each tissue usually is regulated at the minimal level that will supply the tissue's requirements, no more, no less. By controlling local blood flow in such a very exact way, that is to just slightly above the what is required, then the tissues almost never suffer from oxygen deprivation, and yet the workload of the heart is kept at a minimum. Okay, so please remember that the control is primarily dictated by the need of the tissue. So with that, let us discuss two control mechanisms. One is local, the other one is global or neural. Okay, under local, ang pag-uusapan lang natin dito would be the mechanisms leading to vasodilatation and vasoconstriction. Yun lang naman yung nangyayari locally. When the need is great, dilate. When the need is little, constrict, so that the blood can be diverted to where it is needed. So under local control, let me just local humoral will be all about the things or the substances that will cause vasoconstriction and vasodilatation. Under local control, merong acute, merong long-term. Acute control is achieved by rapid changes in the local vasodilatation and vasoconstriction of the arterioles, and this occurs within seconds to minutes. Long-term naman, on the other hand, means slow, controlled changes in flow over a period of days, weeks, or even months. And this is usually accomplished through physical changes like an increase in tissue vascularity or formation of collateral circulation. Okay, so under acute control, there are several theories that would probably explain this, and these are the theories that we will discuss in the next slides. Okay, so under local, acute, and long-term, yung acute is yung mabilisang dilatation and constriction. Long-term control is still under local, and this is the appearance or disappearances of blood vessels, which you will probably learn later as I give examples. Let's start with acute control. And the first theory to explain acute control is the vasodilator theory, which states that as the rate of metabolism increases, the blood flow increases as well because of the release of a metabolic substance called adenosine. So when the tissue need is great, kasi highly metabolic, okay, exercising muscle, the blood flow should go there. How do you make the blood flow go there? They dilate the arteriole so that the blood will enter the capillaries. What dilates the arteriole? Adenosine. Okay, so that's the vasodilator theory. Oxygen also is another substance involved in vasodilatation and vasoconstriction. Simply put, oxygen daw is needed for the smooth muscles to contract. Meaning, if there is no oxygen, the smooth muscles will not contract. Therefore, it will normally dilate. So according to this diagram, as the oxygen saturation decreases, the blood flow increases because the blood vessels will dilate. So this is evident in several examples. Living in a high altitude, carbon monoxide poisoning, cyanide poisoning. All of this will probably talk about decreased oxygen content. So if there is decreased oxygen, the smooth muscles would relax. Definitely, the arterioles will dilate. So pag dilated, flushed yung patient, yung person. Living in a high altitude, you learn mababa ang oxygen level sa concentration sa atmosphere. Not only the person will have increased erythropoiesis, since mababa yung oxygen, magdadilate yung blood vessels. It's the same with carbon monoxide poisoning, which poisons the ability of the hemoglobin to deliver oxygen kasi ang pinifavor ng hemoglobin dito is yung carbon monoxide rather than the oxygen. And cyanide poisoning, which poisons the ability of the tissue to utilize oxygen. In all of these examples, mababang oxygen, dilated ang vessels. Okay, so that's the oxygen law theory. The third theory that I would like to discuss is something that we do normally, and this is now again going back to the laminar and the turbulent flow. When the blood supply to a tissue is blocked for quite some time, when you apply the BP cuff, kung natuloy lang sa ating practical exam natin, when you apply the tourniquet. Okay? When the blood supply to a tissue is blocked for quite some time and is then unblocked, blood flow through the tissue is increased to several times normal. This increase in flow will continue for as long as the tissue has been blocked. This phenomenon is called reactive hyperemia. In reactive hyperemia, is another manifestation of the local metabolic blood flow regulation mechanism. That is, lack of flow sets into motion all of those factors that cause vasodilatation. After short periods of vascular occlusion, the extra blood flow during the reactive hyperemia phase lasts long enough to repay almost exactly the tissue oxygen deficit that has accrued during the period of occlusion. Tingin sa akin. You apply the BP cuff into the arm of the patient whom you would like to measure the blood pressure. You increase the sphygmomanometer to a period wherein the blood flow is already totally blocked. Mga around 160, 170. So what happens when you block the blood flow? You do not allow the oxygen to be delivered in that area. So what happens to the blood vessels when there is no oxygen? The blood vessels will now dilate. You will then release the cuff slowly. So what will now happen to the rate of blood flow entering the blood vessels that are dilated? The rate is increased. Kasi sa Poiseuille's phenomenon, once you increase the diameter of the blood flow, the conductance is increased, and the increase in the conductance is raised to the fourth power. How then do we now connect everything? You inflate the cuff, you impede the blood flow totally, no oxygen is delivered, effect, vasodilatation. The increase in vessel diameter will now make, when the blood flow enters it, the rate is tremendously increased. What happens now to the flow? The flow becomes turbulent because the rate is increased. And when the flow is turbulent, there is a sound. That's why as you try to listen for the sound, when you are deflating the cuff, there is a sound. The first sound now is the systolic pressure. But as you completely deflate the cuff, you are now allowing oxygen to go to that area. What will now happen to the blood vessel? The blood vessel now will go back to its original diameter. And when the sound disappears, it just means that the flow already converted from being turbulent to laminar again. And when there is laminar flow, there is no sound. And the disappearance of the sound, according to BP, that's Korotkov number 5, signals the diastolic pressure. Laminar flow, no sound, turbulent flow with the sound. So we use this phenomenon now to measure the BP. Why did the flow become turbulent? Why did the Reynolds number becomes high? It's because of the increase in velocity. What increased the velocity? The dilatation of the blood vessels. What caused the blood vessels to dilate? Absence of oxygen. What caused the oxygen to be absent? Because you inflated the cuff. Kung hindi mo kasi i-inflate yung cuff and you try to listen for the sound, wala kang maririnig na sound. Because the blood flow in that artery traversing the antecubital fossa of that patient is laminar. Clear ba, Andrea?
Yes po.
Why do you apply the tourniquet when you are trying to get a blood in venipuncture? Kasi when you block the flow, the blood vessels will dilate. And when the blood vessels are dilated kasi walang oxygen, you can now see the blood vessel. Kung makita mo siya, di madali mo na siyang makukuhanan ng blood. That's the principle behind the tourniquet. I don't know if some medtechs have already experienced this when you use Accutane or when you use kahit syringe. Minsan you do not even have to pull the plunger. The blood will just enter. Why? Because the pressure is high. Why? Because the blood vessels became dilated. Pag dilated, was slow lagi yun, conductance. Raised to the 4th power, mataas ang pressure. Okay, so that's the reason, or that's the principle about reactive hyperemia. In the 4th principle is just like with the vasodilator theory. That's the active hyperemia, which says that anything that becomes active, the rate of blood flow through the tissue increases. So increasing the amount of liberated or produced metabolite causes vasodilatation. Last principle is autoregulation, and this is very simple. In any tissue of the body, an acute increase in arterial pressure, 0, 50, 100, would probably increase an immediate rise in blood flow. Ohm's law. Diba? Anything increasing the pressure difference increases the blood flow. But autoregulation states that as you further increase the pressure, the blood flow normalizes. Kasi yun ang purpose ng autoregulation, to maintain a normal blood flow despite changes in blood pressure. That's autoregulation. And there is autoregulation whenever the MAP, mean arterial pressure, is between 75 to 175, or I don't know how it was given in the lecture, but there are some books stating between 80 to 160. Meaning as long as the MAP is between those pressure limits, the blood flow will just be the same, even if you try to increase or decrease the BP. Regulation of blood flow despite changes in blood pressure. And there are two mechanisms explaining this, the metabolic and the myogenic theory. Assignment. What's the difference between the metabolic and the myogenic theory? Clear? Doc, can you give me one example, or can you give us one example on probably how can we better understand autoregulation? Tingin sa akin. Any increase in cardiac output probably increases also the blood entering your kidney. And if you increase the blood flow entering the kidney, that will probably translate to increased urine production. Ang point doon, makita nyo lang dito sa background ko si Dr. Valerio, kakabahan kayo. Will that make you urinate? Hindi. Kasi Any increased fluctuation in the blood pressure, the autoregulatory mechanism will make it sure that the blood flow will just be the same. Okay, so that's autoregulation operated either by a metabolic or a myogenic theory. This is clearly explained in the book. Read on it. Before I proceed to the long, tapos na tayo sa local acute control. Vasodilator, oxygen lack theory, reactive hyperemia, active hyperemia, and autoregulation. Before I go to the long-term control, which is very simple, let me just read something in the chat. Yes, ayun pala, sumagot lang pala sa yes po, Doc, mataas po pressure. Okay, so let us now go to the long-term control. As I have said, acute control, acute local control is all about second-to-second increase in dilatation or increase constriction. In long-term control, this occurs within several weeks days, and this usually involves the appearance or disappearance of blood vessels. Okay, so changes in tissue vascularity when there is a bone infection, napakataas ng metabolism required for a bone to heal. So when that happens, because of the increased demand for nutrients to probably cause that bone to heal, you can expect blood vessels to appear. Okay, so that is one example of long-term control, changes in tissue vascularity. When the bone is already healed, the blood vessels will just disappear. Okay, that's one example. For the newborns, I don't know if everybody is familiar with a premature baby. No, what's the meaning of a premature baby? It means that the baby was born less than the required number of months or weeks, and the main concern here is the lungs of that baby, because the lungs may be too immature to function. So whenever we deliver a premature baby, that baby is placed in an incubator that is containing high amount of oxygen. That is to support the pulmonary function of the baby. But the oxygen that is being given to the baby is detrimental to the baby's eyes. Why? Because when the eyes with blood vessels, for that matter, are exposed to high levels of oxygen, the blood vessels will stop from growing. Or sometimes even the blood vessels which have already formed, they disappear. Kasi sabi ng mga blood vessels, ang daming oxygen. There's so much oxygen, so probably we are not needed. But when the baby is taken out of the incubator, the sudden decrease in the amount of oxygen will cause that blood vessels to grow naman explosively. And then sometimes the overgrowth of the blood vessels can cover the retina of the baby's eyes. That can lead to blindness. So this is just, again, another dramatic example on how blood vessels can appear or disappear depending on the presence or absence of oxygen. Collateral circulation formation, which is actually common in the heart. Okay? Sometimes in our lives, even in this younger age of ours, with the habit that we have with regard diet, samgyup, diba? Mga buffet, that could probably have caused several of our coronaries to have been blocked. Did we feel the pain? No, because of the sudden, very, very rapid formation of collateral circulation. It's one example of a long-term control. These are examples of vasoconstrictor or vasodilator agents. All of these are vasoconstrictors. Please remember that angiotensin 2 is a vasoconstrictor agent. Okay, examples of ion, the vasodilator. That's why when Dr. Barbon probably discussed WBCs, release of histamine, bradykinin whenever there is inflammatory conditions. So ang manifestation is edema. It's a vasodilator. Effect of ions and other chemicals with regard, these are examples of chemicals and ions leading to vasoconstriction and vasodilatation. We are done with local control. We go now to neural. We go now to the more global one, which is actually the neural control. Kanina, when we talk about local, pinag-uusapan natin doon, vasodilatation, vasoconstriction affecting blood flow. So, tissue need. This is now we are something more global, more neural no? Ang kinokontrol naman ng neural regulation is yung mismong blood pressure na at saka yung cardiac output. As discussed earlier, adjustment of blood flow is mainly the function of local tissue blood flow control mechanism. Now, here in the succeeding slides, the nervous control of the circulation, you will realize, has more global functions, providing very rapid control of systemic arterial pressure. The nervous system controls the circulation almost entirely through the autonomic nervous system. And as I emphasized kanina sa pagsagot kanina ni Shern, sorry, it's not really the para, no? It's more of the sympa. Meron din naman ang para, pero ang parasympathetic only terminates, yung function niya will only be confined to the level of the heart. But if we are to look at vasoconstriction, venodilatation, venoconstriction, then probably this is all about sympathetic. Sympathetic lang ang umaabot sa blood vessels. Constriction, sympathetic stimulation, vasodilatation is sympathetic inhibition. This is the anatomy of the sympathetic nervous system, showing you that the sympathetic terminates both in the heart as well as in the blood vessels. All blood vessels are stimulated or supplied except the capillaries. So sympathetic stimulation to the arteries probably would limit the amount of blood entering the capillary, while sympathetic stimulation to the venous system promotes venous return by decreasing venous compliance. I am showing you again the reflex arc. Probably this was already discussed in the autonomic nervous system. When we talk about the reflex arc, there are 5 parameters involved. Okay, never the brain. Hindi umaabot ang reflex arc sa brain. Hahawak ka ng isang matulis na bagay. You step on a thumbtacks o kaya nail, no? Sasabihin mo ba, ay pako, masakit, tsaka kaiiwas, no? Hindi ganun. It should be a reflex mechanism because it does not anymore go to the brain. Usually nasa brainstem lang. So whenever we talk about the reflex arc, there are 5 structures. The receptor, the sensory, the center, the efferent, the motor neuron, and the effector. Okay? I am discussing this because one mechanism or several mechanisms that control the blood pressure involves the reflex arc. Okay, so please remember the components of the reflex arc. Somewhere in the reticular substance of the medulla and the lower third of the pons is an area called the vasomotor center. So going back to the reflex arc, there is a center. So with regard blood pressure control, we are now talking about the vasomotor center, located somewhere in the medulla and in the lower pons. So that is now the vasomotor center, which has 3 centers: the constrictor, the dilator, and the sensory area. The sensory area is said to be located in the nucleus of the tractus solitarius. The sensory area or the nucleus of the tractus solitarius detects what is the stimulus. Tingin sa akin, I will just make it simple. Pag mataas ang pressure, yun ang unang stimulus, the vasomotor center will try to bring it down to normal. If the initial stimulus is a low pressure, the vasomotor center through its sensory area in the nucleus solitarius will try to bring the pressure back to normal. So all the concern is always to bring the pressure back to normal. Okay, and with regard blood pressure control mechanisms, there are several things that would control the blood pressure within seconds or minutes. There are some within minutes to hours, and there are some long-term, like the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. So I think we-discuss natin now. No? Give me 15 minutes and I'm done. So there are reflex arc involved, like the baroreceptor, the central ischemic mechanism, chemoreceptor mechanism. And there are involving just the capillaries. We will discuss them later. Let me just discuss to you the baroreceptor reflex mechanism, which operate within seconds or minutes. Again, I just would like to emphasize that these mechanisms, the main purpose is to maintain a normal blood pressure, regardless of what the stimulus is, whether it's high pressure or low pressure. So the 5 components of the baroreceptor reflex arc are the following. The baroreceptors are located in the carotid or in the aortic arc. Their sensory neurons are either the glossopharyngeal or the vagus nerve, the center. And depending on the pressure, the center will give off either sympathetic or parasympathetic nerve stimulation to the heart and the blood vessels. Again, the purpose is to maintain the BP. Okay, and these are the components in a diagram. So increase in blood pressure, no, I will not explain it na. Mayroon akong video na isasabihin, then this video will explain to you the function of the baroreceptor reflex mechanism. Please listen to the video.
Baroreflex.
Wait, I need to stop it. Can you hear the sound?
Yes po.
Reflex is one of the mechanisms the body uses to maintain stable blood pressure levels or homeostasis. Baroreflex provides a rapid negative feedback loop in which an elevated blood pressure causes heart rate and blood pressure to decrease. Reversely, a decrease in blood pressure leads to an increased heart rate, returning blood pressure to normal levels. The reflex starts with specialized neurons called baroreceptors. These are stretch receptors located in the wall of the aortic arch and carotid sinus. Increased blood pressure stretches the wall of the aorta and carotid arteries, causing baroreceptors to fire action potentials at a higher than normal rate. These increased activities are sent via the vagus and glossopharyngeal nerves to the nucleus of the tractus solitarius, the NTS, in the brainstem. In response to increased baroreceptor impulses, the NTS activates the parasympathetic system, the PSNS, and inhibits the sympathetic system, the SNS. As the PSNS and SNS have opposing effects on blood pressures, PSNS activation and SNS inhibition work together in the same direction to maximize blood pressure reduction. Parasympathetic stimulation decreases heart rate by releasing acetylcholine, which acts on the pacemaker cells of the SA node. Inhibition of the sympathetic division decreases heart rate, stroke volume, and at the same time causes vasodilation of blood vessels. Together, these events rapidly bring down blood pressure levels back to normal. When a person has a sudden drop in blood pressure, for example when standing up, the decreased blood pressure is sensed by baroreceptors as a decrease in tension. Baroreceptors fire at a lower than normal rate and the information is again transmitted to the NTS. The NTS reacts by inhibiting parasympathetic and activating sympathetic activities. The sympathetic system releases norepinephrine, which acts on the SA node to increase heart rate, on cardiac myocytes to increase stroke volume, and on smooth muscle cells of blood vessels to cause vasoconstriction. Together, these events rapidly bring up blood pressure levels back to normal. Baroreflex is a short-term response to sudden changes of blood pressure resulted from everyday activities and emotional states. If hypertension or hypotension persists for a long period of time,
let's
the
start it from there.
baroreceptor.
So the baroreceptor reflex mechanism, again, make sure that the blood pressure will always be normal. So you have learned that when the pressure is high, this is detected now by the baroreceptors either in the carotid or in the aortic arc. So the sensory neuron will depend on what is the receptor. The center, realizing it that this is a high pressure, will now cut off the sympathetic and will just allow the parasympathetic to be transmitted. So parasympathetic stimulation of the heart decreases the heart rate. But the absence of sympathetic stimulation to the blood vessels causes vasodilatation. So anong endpoint nun? The pressure goes down. So the opposite is just the same. Coming from a supine position, everybody knows what supine position is. You suddenly stood up. By gravity, the blood will just be in the lower extremities. But what will the baroreceptor do? Sensing that the pressure arriving at the aortic and the carotid is low because the blood is in the lower extremities, because you suddenly stood up. The baroreceptor, sensing that there is no pressure, will now stop the parasympathetic from being transmitted. It will just transmit the sympathetic nerve stimulation. So what will happen to the heart rate? The heart rate goes up, the vessels constrict, bringing the pressure up. Whenever you stand up, mabilis, no? Why is there palpitation? It's because of the baroreceptor reflex. The purpose is to maintain a normal blood pressure. Otherwise, you will fall down again because of dizziness. Tawag doon orthostatic hypotension. But that doesn't happen if your baroreceptor reflex mechanism is good. Okay, so those are the ways by which the baroreceptor controls the BP regardless of the stimulation. In the chemoreceptor reflex mechanism, it's just the same. All the structures are the same. The mechanism is just the same. The stimulus is different. Here, the stimulus is arterial oxygen. So low arterial oxygen stimulates it. High arterial oxygen probably does the opposite. But it's just the same with the baroreceptor. Okay. Next is ischemic, CNS ischemic response. It is said that whenever the blood pressure to the brain decreases appreciably, this will now result to an explosive stimulation of the vasomotor center, resulting to increased BP. Probably the nurses are familiar with this. This usually happens in the intensive care unit. Whenever the blood flow to a dying patient is significantly decreased, sometimes their blood pressure is already palpatory, meaning you cannot even hear for it because it's too weak. You can just palpate for it. Sometimes their blood pressure goes up to as high as 250 millimeter mercury. Ang tawag doon CNS ischemic response. This happens whenever the blood flow to the brain is appreciably decreased. Another form of CNS ischemic response is what we call the Cushing's reaction. It's just the same, only that the cause of the decreased blood flow is because of an increased intracranial pressure. But nonetheless, the endpoint of this is still CNS ischemic response. Capillary fluid shift is very simple. This is just playing with the four Starling forces. So any increase in blood pressure, so the goal is always to bring the blood pressure to normal. Any increase in blood pressure probably would favor filtration, and the filtration will decrease the blood volume, bringing the pressure back to normal. So the opposite is different. If the blood pressure is low, reabsorption is favored, always bringing the blood volume to normal and the blood pressure to normal. Okay, let us discuss the last two topics under control, and this is now referable to the kidneys. So one form or one example of the capillary fluid shift is the renal fluid or renal fluid volume shift. Now, this is the same with the capillary fluid shift, only that we are talking about the kidneys. So let me introduce to you the kidneys. Renal physiology is something that you will discuss in the second semester, but I think everybody naman are knowledgeable on what kidneys are. No, these probably are being discussed in the elementary and as well high school, college. So the kidneys, of course, is definitely inside the body. It is very vascular because it is directly receiving blood from the aorta. Okay, and anything that enters the kidneys would be filtered to become the urine. So the basic function of the functional unit of the kidney is called the nephron. So there is a special type of capillaries there called the glomerulus. They are also capillaries, but the details of which will just be discussed in the second sem. But nonetheless, it's still a capillary. So the arteriolar end of the glomerulus is what we call the afferent arteriole, and ang iba tong glomerulus kasi hindi venial yung karugtong niya. The other end of the glomerulus is also an arteriole, which we call the efferent arteriole. But nonetheless, just try to think about the glomerulus as a capillary tube. And the arteriolar end is what we call the efferent arteriole. So what is renal fluid shift? Anything that will probably increase the cardiac output would translate to an increased amount of blood being delivered into the afferent arteriole and would translate to an increased amount of blood entering the glomerular capillaries. So whenever the amount of blood entering the glomerular capillary is high, that will just translate to increased urine production and increased urination. Is that clear? So if I give you this scenario, si Andrea, sabi ko, Andrea, you drink 3 liters of fluid in 1 hour. Kaya yun minsan, no? 3 liters, 1 hour. So what did you increase when you increase the amount of fluid intake? You are increasing the blood volume because anything you take will be reabsorbed into the blood. So what is now the consequences of that? You increase oral fluid intake, you increase the blood volume, you increase the venous return, you increase the blood going back to the right side of the heart, you increase the amount of blood being pumped by the heart. The question is, will increase in oral fluid intake lead to increased BP? The answer is no, as long as the kidneys are functional. Because any increase in blood volume increases the cardiac output, but that will also translate to increase in urination. Kaya pag inom ka ng inom, ihi ka rin ng ihi because your kidneys are trying to maintain a normal BP. This is not true among patients with chronic kidney diseases or those patients who cannot adequately filter volume. Because if you increase the fluid in or the volume of the blood of these patients with chronic kidney disease, filtration is not good. Where does the volume go? It remains in the blood. And if it remains in the blood pressure goes up. Okay, so that's renal fluid shift. If on the other hand, the blood pressure is low, o di konti lang, very little amount of blood is entering the glomerulus, filtration is low, decreased urination, preservation of the blood volume, preservation of the blood pressure. That's why when you are dehydrated, one very objective finding is you are not urinating. And that is one sign that you are already dehydrated because your kidneys are trying to preserve the volume through renal fluid shift. Okay, the last thing regarding the control is the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. And this is one mechanism by which kidneys, again, function to maintain a normal blood pressure, especially if the stimulus is prolonged, decreased in blood volume or decreased in blood pressure. There is another structure in the kidney, just try to remember it, called the macula densa. This is located somewhere between the afferent and the efferent arteriole, which detects the amount of sodium being delivered into that area. So simply put, if the blood volume or the blood pressure is always low, the macula densa will sense that konti lang yung dumadating na sodium. It means that the GFR or the glomerular filtration rate is low. It means that the blood pressure or the blood volume is low. What will the macula densa do? It will now tell the JG cells to secrete renin, and the endpoint of renin production is the production of A2 or angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 has 3 functions. Number 1, I said that angiotensin 2 is a powerful vasoconstrictor. So the initial stimulus is decreased BP, decreased blood volume. The endpoint is to maintain the blood pressure to normal level. Because angiotensin 2 is a very powerful vasoconstrictor. On the other hand, angiotensin 2 also retains fluid by producing aldosterone and by producing ADH. So, tandaan na lang, hindi ko na masyadong elaborate because this is a lecture that you will have in the second sem. Whenever angiotensin 2 is produced from the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system, two important effects will occur. Number one, vasoconstriction, because angiotensin II is a powerful vasoconstrictor, and the retention of fluid through the release of ADH and aldosterone. When you retain fluid, you bring up the blood pressure. So that's how the kidneys function in cases of prolonged decrease in blood pressure or prolonged decrease in blood volume. Doc, what is an example of a condition wherein the blood pressure or the blood pressure will be decreased for a prolonged period of time? Yung unang SGD nyo sa heart, yung may mitral stenosis. So when there is mitral stenosis, it's very difficult to transmit the blood from the left atrium to the left ventricle, meaning the left ventricle will pump very little amount of blood. If that happens, very little amount of blood goes into the kidney, and that is detected by the macula densa. The pressure is maintained by increasing the level of angiotensin II. Both a vasoconstrictor and a powerful product that retains water, all of which will increase the blood pressure back to normal. Okay, I think that is the last part of our lecture, and that will now end the whole topic in this about the circulatory and the vascular system, part of the cardiovascular system. So in summary, what we have discussed in the second part are the control mechanisms controlling blood in the local area as well as in the global area parameters. No? So sa local area is tissue control, acute long-term. Sa global or sa neural control would be probably about this. They call this the vasomotor center, the sympathetic nervous system. And another organ aside from the brain would be the kidneys. Okay, any question?